Hey everyone, and welcome to Our Weird World. Oh man, this is gonna be an episode. So here's the thing. I host other podcasts for work, and I was about to launch into that one, and it was gonna get weird for a second, and then I paused because I couldn't remember the name of this show. Oh God! All right. You know, here's the thing. Again, I say this a lot. I could just re-record this entire intro, but I'm not going to do it because, you know, in a world where everything is fake, entertainment in general is just a polished turd to make you think that things are better than they really are. And I realize that kind of contradicts the entire ethos of this show, which is things are actually better than they are. But no, historically speaking, that is still true. Things are so much better than they are. But in the entertainment world, everything is a dumpster fire. All right. Art is a lie. Art is a giant photoshopped deep fake of an idealized life. And I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to be real with you guys. And I'm going to tell you when stuff sucks. And this episode already sucks. That is where I am at right now. But like, if you prefer super polished podcasts that don't remind you of the entropy and chaos in the world, fine, go listen to whatever. All right. I'm sure Rogan edits the hell out of his podcasts, taking out all the uhs and ums and you knows and all that. Yeah, sure. Go for it. Go listen to him. He's got the budget. You go listen, go buy his ads for whatever the focus powder the alpha brains and whatever. You go do that. All right. You go do that. Go live under. What am I doing? What? Today, we're talking about a couple of famous abductions from history, the abductions of Patty Hearst and Brian Wells. So let's try to get in and get through this. Story time. We're going to start with the Patty Hearst abduction, but I'm not going to tell you the story of Patty Hearst because her abduction's not really about her. She was just this socialite that got caught up in this. All right. So we're talking instead about Donald DeFries, who was born on November 15th, 1943 in Cleveland, Ohio. His father was a violent alcoholic who on 3 separate occasions broke both of Donald's arms as punishment for doing something wrong. That is intense. Like, the first time, fine. All right. I'm not saying you get a pass, but to break both of your kids' arms in just a violent outburst, fine. It happens once. And then you move on to an even more violent punishment. But like, that was his go-to. So DeFries had both of his arms broken 3 separate times. And look, I don't know if you've ever met anybody who had a broken arm back in like the 40s and 50s, but their arms don't work right no more. All right. Like my grandpa, for example, he broke his arm when he was a kid back in like the 40s, and his arm was just like permanently bent, like at the elbow. Like he couldn't straighten his arm out. I don't think he could rotate it either. So like, so Donald's real messed up from an early age. When he was 14, he dropped out of school and ran away to Buffalo, New York, where he moved in with a minister and joined a street gang, which are 2 very opposite things, but you know, maybe he needed some variety in his life. After spending time in a reformatory for stealing a car, Donald then moved to Newark, New Jersey, where he married Gloria Thomas and had 3 kids. However, Donald didn't really like family life, so he left everyone, abandoned his family, and moved off to California, where he was quickly arrested after police found him carrying a pencil bomb, a sharpened butter knife, and a sawed-off rifle in a suitcase. Gloria, to her credit, had also informed police and charged him with desertion and actually had him extradited back to New Jersey. And but here's the thing. Gloria didn't get a divorce. Instead, in 1965, he decided to leave for California again, but took his entire family with him this time. However, his erratic behavior continued. He was arrested later that year in 1965 for firing a gun in his basement. 2 years later, police found him carrying 2 homemade bombs and a pistol after he ran a red light on his bicycle. Rather than face prison time, though, Donald was placed on probation, despite several psychiatric reports suggesting that his fascination with firearms and explosives made him a danger to society. But again, it's California. Whatever, we just let him go. He's probably fine. However, in 1969, Donald was arrested back in Cleveland, Ohio, after he was spotted on the roof of a bank carrying 2 pistols and a dagger with a hand grenade in his pocket. How is he getting all of these explosives also? That is fascinating to me. After paying $2,000 in bond and returning to Los Angeles, he was arrested a month later after a gun battle with the LAPD after he stole a $1,000 cashier's check. This time, he was actually sent to prison and was not going to get let out. So, while he's in prison, he joined the Black Cultural Association, which was an organization used by the University of California, Berkeley, to allow students to visit prisoners and engage in educational and political discussions. So, yes, Donald DeFreeze is black. Go ahead, be racist with your prejudices all about it. I left that out purposely because I know you whites and your prejudices against blacks. Anyway, I don't know. So he's in prison, and Cal Berkeley, super Libby organization, they're bringing their students in to the prison to engage in deep philosophical political discussions with prisoners. Because what else are you going to do with your time? So through this program, Donald met a group of extreme liberals who quickly converted him to their way of thinking. And I mean, by extreme liberals, I don't mean like, oh yeah, you got to be vegan and live in a tiny home with solar power and, fetch your own rainwater. No. I'm talking like extreme liberal as in, this wouldn't apply back then, but it applies today. Not using GIFs and memes of black people because that is considered digital blackface. And that's not a thing I just made up. That is a real thing that the extreme left is trying to push right now. It hasn't caught on yet, but I've seen rumblings of it, where if you are a white person and you post a meme or a GIF that is of a black person reacting to something, that is considered digital blackface and is a racist action on your part. It's the dumbest thing. Here's the thing. I like to think that I am a left-leaning person, but that's ridiculous. That is the dumbest thing. Because honestly, that's like so far left, you're basically like humping the right. Because when you start to say, okay, white people can't use black imagery, now you're starting to come back to segregation. White people use white things and black people can use the black things. It's so stupid how little common sense and little critical thinking that people seem to have. And it's these, privileged white people who have so much, advantage and privilege in society that they think they're smarter than they actually are. I go to Stanford and Cal Berkeley. I'm smart. No, your parents just had a lot of money. And anyway, I'm going to get off this soapbox for now. So rather than join this group outright, rather than join the Black Cultural Association outright, Donald actually formed his own group called Unisight, where he recruited 2 white students and a former Black Panther to join before he was transferred over to another prison. On March 5th, 1973, Donald actually escaped from this prison, the Soledad prison, and ran to Oakland to hide with members of the Black Cultural Organization. Once things died down, California police apparently just gave up looking for him. He moved in with a woman named Patricia Soltysik and formed the Symbionese Liberation Army. You may have heard of this group. It was another kind of civil rights group, more militant, if we're being honest, akin to kind of the Black Panthers and stuff like that. And by the end of 1973, the SLA made it their mission to bring attention to various political issues, namely Black issues and the plight of the homeless. After murdering Oakland School Superintendent Marcus Foster, Donald and the SLA then kidnapped Patty Hearst, who was the heiress to the vast Hearst media empire. Hearst media owned a lot of newspapers at that time, had a lot of power, had a lot of influence at Patty. Obviously, her kidnapping then made a lot of national headlines, and that happened on February 4th, 1974. Although they initially held her for ransom, Hearst actually began to sympathize with her kidnappers before she too became an official member of the SLA and actually began helping them rob banks across California. So this is that classic kind of Stockholm syndrome situation where Patty, she's this little privileged white girl. She gets kidnapped by these black terrorists, basically is what they were. And then she's like, oh man, I didn't realize things were this bad. I'm going to help you. And then this little white girl just starts robbing banks in California with this group. And because the Hearst kidnapping and subsequent brainwashing into joining the SLA was such a national sensation, a few strange conspiracy theories arose surrounding Donald DeFreeze and the SLA. For starters, at some point in one of Donald's prior arrests, there was some evidence that came out that he actually may have agreed to become an informant and even helped the LAPD arrest one of Donald's own associates who had stolen a gun. And that's not out of this realm of possibility, right? Like prisoners can accept plea deals, under the table plea deals, and become informants all the time. Happens a lot. Many people also pointed to the fact that between 1967 and 1969, Donald was arrested numerous times while supposedly on probation, but was never actually sent to prison. And honestly, that's just because California has a long track record of being terrible with following their own justice system rules. Others believe that the SLA was a fully contracted CIA assassination squad hired to take out members of the Black Panthers. And again, in the 1960s, not the most far-fetched idea. Like I said, conspiracies, but like all of these are totally possible. There's so much evidence to suggest that the CIA was like hiring, assassins for, foreign coups and everything, especially in Latin America. And they also, the FBI famously had it out for Martin Luther King Jr. So the CIA trying to like pick off some Black Panthers and other equal rights members. Yeah, totally. That all tracks. Well, on May 17th, 1974, Donald DeFreeze and 5 other SLA members were cornered by the LAPD and ordered to surrender. After 2 people left the SLA home where they were, the LAPD tossed a tear gas canister into the building and opened fire. Even though the SLA somehow had superior weapons and gas masks, the building caught fire. And as the group entered the crawl space in an attempt to escape, the fire rapidly intensified. The SLA got cornered, and Donald shot himself in the head to kill himself because his other option was to just burn alive. Despite all of that, despite DeFreeze and more or less the leadership of the SLA being dead, Patty Hearst, she's still a full-blown member. All right. She even got into bomb making. She helped make some IEDs and was even involved in 2 unsuccessful attempts to kill police officers in August of 1975. One of those bombs actually did detonate. The other did not. She was also connected to the armed robbery of the Crocker National Bank in Carmichael, California, where she was the getaway driver for the robbery. Finally, on September 18th, 1975, she was arrested in San Francisco with another SLA member by Police Inspector Timothy Casey and his partner Lawrence Pissarro, and an FBI special agent, and a host of other FBI agents. While being booked into jail, Hearst listed her occupation as urban guerrilla and then asked her attorney to relay the following message. Tell everybody that I'm smiling, that I feel free and strong, and I send my greetings and love to all the sisters and brothers out there. Like, she's fully into this. She's fully brainwashed into this. Over time, like, she's held, she goes to trial. She kind of goes through therapy to get out of this. She was ultimately convicted of bank robbery and using a firearm during the commission of a felony. She was given the maximum sentence of 35 years in prison, pending a reduction at final sentence hearing. The problem, though, was that the original judge at her hearing had died. And so a new judge came in and, ultimately handed down a lesser sentence. She was only given 7 years in prison and was sent to the Federal Correctional Institution in Dublin, California. She somehow suffered a collapsed lung in prison and underwent emergency surgery. She tried to appeal the decision, but a lot of prisons just weren't comfortable dealing with her. They didn't want to do any special security measures for her, anything like that. Finally, President Jimmy Carter commuted her sentence to 22 months, or after she had served 22 months, which freed her 8 months before she was eligible for her first parole hearing. She was released officially on February 1st, 1979, but remained on probation for a really, really long time. And her civil rights were not fully restored until Bill Clinton granted her a pardon on January 20th, 2001. Since then, she's published a memoir. She's hosted some, documentary specials on all of this events, done a lot of TV stuff since then, and seems to have basically, for lack of a better term, has made a full recovery from all of the brainwashing and stuff that she went through. Moving on to our second story of Brian Wells, who was born on November 15th, 1956 in Erie, Pennsylvania. At 17, he dropped out of high school and started working for Mamma Maria Pizzeria in Erie, where he was a loyal and loved delivery driver for the next 30 years. But over time, he got tired of just being a good guy, all right? He didn't have a lot going for him. He was balding, I feel ya. He was severely farsighted, which forced him to wear glasses that, from the outside, appeared to magnify the size of his eyeballs. Think of Bubbles from Trailer Park Boys. Just a dopey, kind of sad, kind of simple dude. And again, because he has no real skills. He's kind of slow. He may have had some sort of developmental disability. And he works as a pizza delivery driver. That's all he does. And he does it for 30 years. In early 2003, he met Jessica Hoopsick, who was a local prostitute and drug addict who was willing to do literally anyone for just a little bit of cash to get more drugs. And Wells quickly became a regular client because, look, no normal woman, that's kind of derogatory, but no non-prostitute woman had any interest in this guy. Again, and the way this story ends, it's going to sound like I'm being unnecessarily mean and speaking very unnecessarily rude of this guy, but I need to drive home the point. This was a very simple guy who did not have a lot going for him, and for obvious reasons. At the same time, Jessica Hoopsick met a guy named Kenneth Barnes, who was much less dopey. He had a lot going for him. He was a lot more put together. Barnes asked Hoopsick if she knew of anyone who could be scared into robbing a bank, or basically forcefully coerced. Hoopsick immediately thought of Brian Wells, and so she arranged a meeting between her two gentleman callers, and the two new acquaintances began putting together a devious heist. And the problem with that was that a lot of people are pretty sure that Brian had no idea what was actually taking place. So on August 28th, this plan goes into place. Wells gets the call to deliver a pizza to an address a few miles from the pizzeria. However, this location wasn't a residence, but rather a transmission tower for a local television station. There, Brian was to meet Barnes and another accomplice to officially get this plan going. The original plan was for Wells to wear a fake bomb and claim that 3 black men had strapped it to him, because of course you gotta be racist about it. The bomb was set to detonate after a certain amount of time if he did not return with the money. And there was going to be all of these written instructions for everyone, for him especially, to follow. However, when Wells arrived, he was under the impression that this was just going to be a fake bomb, that it was going to look real, and that everything was going to be totally fine. But when he got there with the pizza, because he still delivered the pizza, he was informed that it was not a fake bomb, that it was definitely a real bomb that was definitely going to detonate if he couldn't just follow these simple instructions to come back with the money. Wells was not a fan of that idea. He tried to fight his way out of it, but he was eventually subdued and had this bomb, which basically looked like an oversized handcuff or an oversized sex collar fastened around his neck. Barnes then gave Wells a homemade shotgun that looked like a walking cane and 2 pages of instructions on how to carry out this bank robbery. These instructions contained a series of timed tasks involving the collection of various keys that Barnes had apparently hidden around the city of Erie that would delay the bomb's detonation and then eventually defuse it once he got the last key. And I know that this sounds like the plot to a very ridiculous action movie, but this all 100% happened. The first task called for Wells to calmly enter a PNC Bank branch and give the teller a note demanding $250,000 in 15 minutes, or else the bomb would explode. The teller, so he goes in, he does this. Unfortunately, the teller didn't have access to the bank's vault, so she instead gave Wells a bag with $8,702 and then triggered the silent alarm. Wells had no idea any of this had happened. So he's got his bag. He feels pretty satisfied with himself. He thinks he's done it. And so he walks out of the bank with just a single bag that he thinks is holding $250,000. It's not. 15 minutes later, police arrived on the scene and found Wells standing beside his Geo Metro, because of course that's what he drives. And again, this was all part of the instructions. He then grabs his papers and he recites the lines that he had been fed about having been forced by black people to wear this bomb. Police, they totally believed him. They called the bomb squad out to help disarm the bomb from his neck. However, 3 minutes before the bomb squad arrived, the bomb detonated, blows a hole out of Wells's chest, and kills him instantly. And news crews are already on the scene. There's a camera on it. There's video footage of him somewhere. You know, the Netflix documentary about this story, they cut away from it. You don't see him get blown up, but I'm sure you can find it out there somewhere. And like at this point also, he's panicking because police are not doing what he thought they would do. He was kind of hoping, like he's kind of sitting there like, hey guys, we're just going to do this voice for both people today. Hey guys, I don't want to do this anymore. Please kind of get this bomb off my neck. I'm freaking out right now. And no one's helping him. They've kind of established a perimeter around him. And then all of a sudden this bomb detonates and blows a hole out of his chest and kills him. And he just slumps over and he's dead. And police are like, whoa, he wasn't lying. Usually they're lying about the bomb. He wasn't lying. So police kind of walk up to him after the fact, and they found the note that he was holding detailing the required task for disarming the bomb. But here's the thing. Police followed all of these instructions to a T. They did it multiple times. They perfected it. But even they could not finish all of the tasks in the estimated time that was outlined in the note, meaning that poor Brian Wells was a dead man either way. Whether the bomb detonated without anyone helping him, or he's just allowed to do his thing and he's running all around Erie, and then his bomb still is going to explode anyway. Police, through a ton of investigative work that I'm not going to go into because it's just boring, they eventually connected the bomb to Kenneth Barnes and a woman named Marjorie Deal Armstrong. Ultimately, they learned that Marjorie had come to this conclusion that she needed to kill her father in order to get her inheritance, but needed additional funds to pay Kenneth Barnes to do it. Basically, Kenneth Barnes was just going to be Marjorie's hitman to kill Marjorie's father. Wells was just a dopey and simple pizza delivery driver who was just going to act as the bait for all of this to take place. Ultimately, police arrested Marjorie a month later after her ex-boyfriend, Bill Rothstein, called police to report that the body of James Roden, who was Marjorie's boyfriend, that she had murdered with a shotgun after a dispute over finances, was hidden in a freezer in Bill's garage. Marjorie was later convicted of Roden's murder and was given 20 years in prison. And then kind of everything about the Wells case, for at least at the time, like this was 2003. A lot of that kind of got forgotten. 2 years later, Marjorie kind of brought everything back to life. She confessed to providing the bomb materials, but insisted that Brian Wells was not just some pawn in this. Like, he was fully invested and was actively involved in developing this plot. In 2007, officials declared this case closed and indicted Marjorie as the mastermind behind the plot, with Wells and Bill Rothstein, who had since died of lymphoma in 2004, as co-conspirators in the robbery. So police ultimately officially believe that Brian Wells had 100% full understanding of what he was doing. Whether he was promised a piece of the money or what, I don't know. They didn't really ever clarify that, but they believe that Wells was not totally innocent in this, and that he was a co-conspirator in this robbery, which kind of sucks because it's like, he's already dead. He can't defend himself. So what does it matter? Barnes, who at this point was in prison on an unrelated drug charge, was ratted out for his involvement by his brother-in-law and was sentenced to an extra 45 years in prison. Marjorie was then given a life sentence for masterminding all of this. Even more, she was never awarded her inheritance after her father's estate, which had only left $2,000 to her to begin with, was used, or the money for that was used to pay off her father's outstanding medical bills. And Marjorie then died of breast cancer on April 4th, 2017. All right, the abductions of Patty Hearst and Brian Wells in the books. Fun stories in a weird way. Like, kind of, people died that probably shouldn't have, and lives were irreparably damaged. But neat stories, huh? Let's see what we learned today.
What did we learn?
Number one, Donald DeFreeze had both of his arms broken at the same time by his violent, drunk, abusive father. And I feel like that can really do a lot to your psyche. Now, crazy that, like, it would have been more understandable if DeFreeze had somehow become like a member of the KKK and just had like anger towards black people. But instead, he grew up with anger towards white people and got into bomb making, joined and created the Symbionese Liberation Army. Was all of that number one? I think it was all number one. Number two, the SLA kidnapped media heiress Patty Hearst. I don't even know if the Hearst media empire is a thing anymore. They may have gotten sold off. I don't know. I don't really care. But brainwashed her, got her into active bomb making and robbing banks, and she was sent to prison for it, ultimately rehabilitated. But just the thought of like this, like, imagine, here's kind of the best comparison I can make to it. Imagine if Paris Hilton got kidnapped by ISIS, and then Paris Hilton just became this militant, terrorist who was like, man, death to America. Like, death to the West. And like, Like, that's what this was. That is really what this was. And number 3, Brian Wells, poor slow fella from Erie, Pennsylvania. Was he truly in full understanding of what he was getting himself into? I don't think we'll really ever know, but he got a bomb strapped to his neck and it blew up and it killed him because this crazy woman needed to just figure out a way to get her father's estate, and she wouldn't have gotten it anyway because it ended up going to pay off his medical bills. Next week on Our Weird World, I'm going to redeem myself. Episode 200, where we went back and found some stories from Florida. That was a disaster. All right. I don't think any of those 5 stories had any kind of coherent chronology or telling to them whatsoever. I had a hard time following it even when I was listening back to it sober. So we're going to try it one more time, totally sober. Next week, going to go and find 5 more stories from the state of Florida. We're looking at the stories of John Knight, the Wakula volcano, Benny Wint, Bird Billings, and Bob Allen. A lot of B's in that in next week's episode, but it'll be fun. Florida's always a dumpster fire, so looking forward to that. Thank you for continuing to listen. Tell all your friends about the show, please. I want to sell Alpha Brain like Joe Rogan and do fun commercials. Like, screw it, dude. If Adam and Eve wants to sponsor this podcast, I'll read some ad spots about stuff to shove in your butt. I don't care. I'm not the one buying it. You are. So if you're out there, I'll sell your stuff. It would be great. Anyway, keep it weird.